The structure of production. Things only get produced when there are people willing to provide resources for that which is being produced. The hunter is willing to spend time and energy making a weapon because he can get more food with that weapon. In a pack of humans, one person may become especially proficient at making weaponry, and the other hunters become willing to give him some extra food for the high-quality weapons he makes, his capital. In this situation, the weapon maker is making a trade. But let's say the weapon maker rents his weapons to the other hunters, and the hunters must give the weapon maker food at some prescribed rate, perhaps a percentage of the kill or a fixed amount. If this occurs, the weapon maker is behaving like the capitalist, and the weapons similar to the factory, and the hunters like the wage laborers. If the weapon maker fails to produce a weapon that works, that is, a weapon that comports to the demands of reality, he will fail to get food and will probably try again until he comes up with a weapon that does work. Similarly, a man can only keep open a restaurant if there are people who demand his food and exchange resources in the form of money for it. If they don't demand his food, he won't be able to keep his restaurant open and will have to try something else for a living, satisfying some other demand of reality. Perhaps he just goes off and works in a factory. For a firm to be successful, it must satisfy some demand of reality in the same way roots of a plant must satisfy the demands of reality. Businesses grow to the money, and roots grow to the nutrients. Businesses do not provide goods and service out of any altruistic zeal. They do so out of self-interest. They want your money. In the same way, plants grow not out of some altruistic zeal, but because they want nutrients. If they are unable to produce something that people want, they will not get money from people. And this is how companies are regulated. Companies that take raw materials and turn them into finished goods are paying for those raw materials. And if the finished goods cannot be sold for more than the cost of those raw materials and the cost of turning those raw materials into finished goods, the company will not profit. This is a signal that says, stop making that. The resources put into making that product are worth more than the product itself. These signals are extremely important. Without prices, profits, and losses, there would be no way for the company to know if the value of the product they are making and selling is worth more or less than the resources put into it, because value is subjective. For example, if it costs $100 to get the materials needed to make a paper jackhammer, and it costs $10 to turn the materials into a paper jackhammer, then it costs $110 to make a paper jackhammer, materials and labor. If people are only willing to buy a paper jackhammer for $50, then the paper jackhammer is unprofitable. This is society's way of saying, we value the raw paper more than the paper jackhammer, and the $60 loss you make on each paper jackhammer is your punishment for wasting the resources of others on something so stupid. However, having prices, profits, and losses are not something to be decided upon. They're something that just happens when humans interact with scarce resources. Different people are good at doing different things, so one person makes furniture, the other chops down trees, the other farms grain, the other farms cows, in an indescribably complex arrangement, or structure of production. In a free market, the only thing that is produced is that which can be exchanged for something else. If a person likes carving ducks, he may be able to exchange it for enough resources to live on. Or he may be forced to carve ducks merely as a hobby, in which case he is the person providing resources to enable his own duck carving hobby. He is exchanging resources for duck carving, materials, and labor for his own psychic benefit. And this structure of production, regulated by prices, profits, and losses, emerges from human action. This emergent order prevents people from wasting resources producing massive amounts of crap that nobody wants without being punished in some way, but only if there is private property in some form, based on some intersubjective consensus of ownership. If an individual doesn't own that which he produces, he does not get rewarded or punished for making stuff that people want or making crap. When you stick your hand on something hot, you feel pain. This pain results in you pulling your hand away from what's hot, or makes it such an ordeal that you will only burn yourself if you absolutely have to, for example, saving someone's life. Similarly, giving up resources for the destitute results in one not having those resources, which is a slight pain. However, one may choose to do so to achieve some internal reward or to be known as a generous man in the community. And these choices are calibrated to ensure the distribution of resources in accordance with subjective value. And this includes individuals choosing to only patronize firms which donate a percentage of their profits to nobler causes or sacrifice profits for environmental considerations. And this may be a result of individuals wanting to be seen as only shopping at such places that protect the environment or donate profits to the poor, and be known as a generous person because of it. And they're only doing it because they want to be known to other people as a generous person. And I think this is great. The desire to be known throughout the community as a generous person is not something to be derided, but something to be supported. Because this desire, or even greed you may say, to be known as a generous person leads to generous actions. And one should support greed in this regard. It is elegant and relatively simple how a free market operates. All of these supposed knots can be shown to be spooks in a few paragraphs, and the origin of arguments against the free market are typically some big business wanting shelter from the constant deluge of competing firms that spring up. Unfortunately, statist arguments rest on each other, so if you show how competition keeps businesses honest, some dunce will claim that competition crushes wages and or results in not having enough slack in the system. Some statists like to claim that competition results in firms not having enough surplus profit or spare cash in the safe to deal with certain eventualities, and thus firms on a free market are brittle, that there's not enough slack in the system, or that it is over-optimized. And this is an error of high abstraction, and so to show it is fallacious, we must go down a level. Firms are able to acquire resources by providing something people want. Forget about money for now. If there is some natural disaster that hits a shoe store, then shoe production will recover to the extent that people are still willing to buy shoes from a shoe store in the location of the original shoe store. If this shoe store, as a result of competition, didn't have enough margin to rebuild on their own dime, they could get a loan from some lender, probably a bank. If the shoe store had been profitable, even if only slightly so, a loan would not be difficult to secure, especially since it would be fairly sure investment as the business was already established. Right? The habits of the relevant population were already established in favor of that shoe store in that location. Right? They know the owner, they know what to expect when they go in there. They have a whole lot of repeat customers that know of that shoe store. The argument that severe competition depresses wages on a free market is fallacious as well. The argument is that firms lower the cost of goods, thus lowering their profit, and thus must lower wages in turn. And this leads to a race to the bottom. And now, did you already see that? They lower the cost of goods. Right? Prices do tend to fall on a free market, and nominal wages tend to actually remain about the same in terms of just the money amount, but the wages are able to buy more and more stuff because everything's getting so much cheaper because firms are getting more efficient and they can produce things for less. Also, having many firms in an industry means many capitalists, but the labor force isn't infinitely flexible. So, if many firms start producing cars, they will be competing for customers in the car factories, and so will bid up the wages and bid down the cost of the product or cars. Now, what may happen is that in 10 years or so, in response to the high wages that auto workers are being paid, a disproportionate number of people learn the skills necessary for auto work, and you have more auto workers than the firms need, and the new firms can't be started because the public doesn't want any more cars. Right? There's already too many car companies. And this is a simple misallocation of resources. And those auto workers predicted incorrectly about what skills the capitalists wanted. The workers, when getting trained, picked the wrong field. In the same way, a capitalist may pick to produce the wrong product. and thus the worker won't be able to rent himself to the capitalist in the same way the capitalist won't be able to sell his product to the buyer if either of them predict incorrectly about the demands of what they're selling their service and or product to.